Hi everyone, I am Brittany, the Cosmic Lunar Soul. Welcome to my channel if you're new. Welcome back to all of my subscribers. So today I want to do a VR to Cody's topic about basically personifying the tarot. I'll put all of the links to the videos that I mentioned in the description box. So if you want to check them out, go ahead and check them out. I do recommend it. People had some really great commentary on this. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So to kind of sum up the topic as a whole, it is about how some people personify tarot while others don't. And I actually found this video from Aquamarine Tarot and Books. And again, I'll put her link in the description. But so that was the first video I saw, and I really like her perspective of things because we kind of have a similar perspective, I think, in regards to whether we do or don't personify tarot and why. But I guess to give you the too long didn't watch version is I don't personify tarot. So I will be coming from that perspective in this regard. And to sum up Cody's video, it was more of a, as someone who does personify tarot, why do the people that don't personify tarot do X, Y, and Z? So that's kind of where this is all coming from. But Cody starts off her video talking about like almost like this smugness that comes from people that don't personify tarot. And maybe because I'm in this group, I don't see that very often. She did caveat in a comment to one of the other video responses that she notices this from a very specific demographic of people. And I'm sure my fellow women, and especially POC women, can kind of guess who I am hinting at. So I do kind of want to take that with a grain of salt because I feel like that smugness is coming from somewhere else and not necessarily coming from just because they don't personify tarot versus someone who does. You know what I mean? I feel like if you know, you know. So, but that being said, I do want to give my perspective of where I think if it's someone else or coming from a different demographic where the smugness might come from. And I don't think it's necessarily smugness from these other people. I think it's probably a level of, or a combination of frustration and exhaustion in not being able to relate to a lot of people. So I talk about this in my, actually in a few videos, in my spicy science video, don't call me pagan video. I mentioned that the woo in like tarot and the witchcraft communities is actually really, really common, and it tends to be the loud majority. So when you aren't coming from that perspective, sometimes it can feel like you're being drowned out. But because of that, especially in the tarot community, when people are giving tips or advice, a lot of times that comes from the woo perspective. So a lot of times you'll get like, oh, sleep with your tarot deck, cleanse your deck, give thanks to your deck, stuff like that. That's very woo. There's really no practicality in that from my perspective, right? There's no logic behind how that's going to help someone who is new to tarot or is struggling in a certain aspect of tarot. To me, that might help them feel better connected inwardly, but it's not going to give them actual practical tips to move forward and get out of the rut that they're in. So instead, I feel like a lot of times people are missing out on the practical tips, such as doing single card pulls every day in order to kind of get practice with doing readings, or flipping through their deck in order to study the imagery of the cards and to compare with the guidebook and all of that, or to simply journal your readings. So I think that sometimes maybe the frustration can come off as a little smug, but I don't know. I've never personally experienced that. So you guys will have to let me know what your thoughts on that are. So, but yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the questions that she posed. The first topic has to do with readings and personality, and I guess the intersect between them. And I kind of am extrapolating the question from the discussion that she had in her video. And this is kind of what I've come up with is how do you read tarot if you don't have a divine connection or you don't see humanity within the cards? But the question gives me kind of the same vibes as like being an atheist in a religious community kind of vibe, where it's like, well, how do you know what's right or wrong if you don't believe in God? But there's like there's logic and practicality in regards to that. So it's such a weird question, or weird confusion, I guess, because and this isn't a knock on her. It just kind of made me chuckle a little bit because I'm like, oh, this kind of feels very much like how I'm questioned by the religious community, and it kind of took me aback a little bit because I was like, oh my gosh, that's very much a mirror of how I feel in interacting with the religious community that I don't often catch in the tarot community. So yeah, it just kind of gave me a quick little chuckle. But I think that, there's a level of obviousness, I feel like, when it comes to tarot, especially tarot specifically. Tarot is a very structured system that has meanings, has interconnectivity between the cards, and then you kind of pull in your own experiences in doing all of that in order to pull it all together, right? So to me, I feel like it's no different than someone learning how to read tarot. It's no different than someone learning how to read, where you have your letters, right? And you pull them together to form words, and then you connect those words together to form sentences, and then eventually you get the full story. So there's like a step-by-step, I don't want to say a step-by-step, but there's steps and there's logic to how you learn and also how you read and what you get out of that reading and stuff like that. And I'll kind of talk about it a little later in the video because this really does touch on my perspective of what divination is and all of that. I've talked about this, like I mentioned in my spicy science video, but I can elaborate a little bit later on. So the next section is a very odd pivot to do you work with crystals? I personally don't see the correlation in this or how this is relevant to the conversation. But I will give my answer and a little bit of my 2 cents in this. So I openly admit on my channel multiple times that I'm not a crystal witch. I have very specific crystals that I work with, and I tend not to branch out from there. So I have like a set, I would probably say maybe 4 or 5. I mean, 4 or 5 don't even come to mind at first, but maybe about 4 or 5 that I will work with. Everything else is more so just on display because I get a lot of crystals from my monthly subscription box, but I don't actually use them. I just think they're pretty. Like the goblin dragon brain, just really pretty shiny rocks, really. But scientifically speaking, crystals are, the different crystals have different chemical compounds, or different chemical compositions rather, and logically that means they should give off a different energy. So I don't see how that has anything to do with needing to personify a crystal, or how that relates to personifying a deck of cards. I personally didn't see the connection in this, even though I watched the video a few times and tried to draw some connections based off of, she was trying to explain it, but it doesn't connect to me. But I will say too, she mentions in her video about how there's lab created crystals and like homegrown crystals, I guess. I don't know, earth made. I don't know what to call them. But to me, I feel like, the chemical composition is the chemical composition. The only difference in lab created, theoretically, is just that they were created more quickly than when they're created in the earth. And it boils down to really just the labor costs that go into them. So I don't really see how, a lab made crystal versus an actual earth made crystal is different, unless it's like they do have heat treated amethyst is often sold as citrine. So stuff like that is different, but I feel like those are like knockoffs, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense and I'm not just rambling wildly. But to me, it's no different than like, pouring water from the tap or from a water bottle and then in a lab combining hydrogen and oxygen and making water that way. It still ends up being H2O. So the next topic is this was also a weird question, I guess, and it was like, if you don't personify your deck, so I have more than one deck. But that's like asking someone why they have more than one photograph in their house, or why art museums have more than one version of a specific type of art, or, why hang more than one painting in your house. So I hope I'm not being too flippant about that, but yeah, it's a strange question because different decks are pretty. I mean, I guess like going back to the crystal conversation, why have different versions of quartz in your house? Like, if you have one piece of quartz, then that should be good enough, right? I have it because I want it because it's pretty. So for the non-flippant answer in regards to this, I see, and as you can probably extrapolate, I see tarot as both divination, but then the cards are also art. And art triggers a different part of our psyche when we interact with it. So 3 different people can look at the same piece of art and feel something different or get something different out of it. And I think that I do readings for others and I also do readings for myself. So in having decks that are different, I have something that should work for almost anyone, if that makes sense. So I think that having different tarot decks can help tap into like a nuanced difference. Even if you're asking the same question, your brain triggers something different in the response that you're getting. So I think that makes getting different tarot decks really fun because you can see how you interact with these different decks. And I think that's where some of the personification is coming from. I just don't see it as personification. I see more of it as a connection with one's psyche or one's, it's more of a behavioral science, I guess, if I had to sum it up to anything. So, yeah, I also think that too, some people are just collectors. They think that they're pretty. They want to collect decks. Same with crystals, same with jewelry, same with, any other physical object in the world. So going on to my framework of belief, this is kind of where I was hinting at in the beginning of the video, and I've talked about in other videos. My framework of belief is around energy. So a lot of everything that forms my understanding, I try to rely back on to more of a scientific or rational, logical kind of understanding. So one of the core things is in life, everything in the world, in the universe, is comprised of energy. That's something that's understandable, something that for the most part we experience. So that means I have something that I can relate to. And also, the thing that helped me get into witchcraft was this quote, that magic is just science we don't understand yet. So those two things kind of form the foundation and the framework of how I do things and the perspective that I come from when I do these things. So, that being said, if I were to describe divination, I would say that divination is um, connecting with that energy. So, if I'm doing a reading for myself, I'm connecting with my own energy to determine the most likely outcome based off of that energy in this moment. So, I don't see tarot as actually reading the future. I think that that is impossible. I think that it reads the most likely scenario to happen based off of the now. Using that, I like to use tarot for a lot of like self improvement or reflection, stuff like that, because as I mentioned before, while I believe that divination in general can help tap into those energies. I feel like the art and stuff in tarot helps tap into the psyche and connects the two. And that gives you I guess that's kind of where the intuition kind of comes into play. But that's where you get a clear idea of what you should do next. So I think the whole goal, if I were to sum up divination, is to find clarity. It's not to, read the future or something like that. But I think that people do this in a lot of different ways. I happen to use tarot and other forms of divination, but other people journal, right? So they're finding ways to connect to that energy through words. Other people meditate. So usually that they're focusing on finding that clarity through opening up their mind, relaxing, whatever, however you meditate. So I don't think that it's that far fetched of a framework or a belief to that makes it so hard to understand. In my opinion, I don't know. Maybe because it's my framework, I'm like, this is so obvious, but maybe it isn't to you guys. So you have to let me know. But to sum it all up, I think that tarot is a great resource to do these things, but tarot is not going to solve your problems. So I think a lot of people that tend to over rely on tarot kind of put too much power, I guess, in a deck and its influence over their lives, because like I said, tarot's not going to solve your problems. It's not going to read the future and tell you explicitly this is going to happen and you must avoid it, that kind of thing. It's going to give you advice to avoid a specific situation or to get to a specific situation based off of what it is you're asking, of course. But I find, because I think of it that way, tarot is purely function and is therefore a tool that helps me achieve other goals. Usually clarity, but whatever that might be. This last section is about, like, I guess to summarize it, is personifying tarot versus anthropomorphizing tarot. I personally don't care if you personify tarot. It's not something that I would do, obviously, but I'm used to it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's not unusual. But anthropomorphizing is where I absolutely draw the line. And now this might be where I do come off a little smug or hoity-toity, but I roll my eyes at this all the time. So it's really funny because I was watching Mayfield from Scottbot Tarot, and she was like, yeah, talking about this section, she was like, yeah, I need to really get off of Reddit. And yeah, I see this a lot in tarot forums, especially with newer people and the like really pagan people. Not to like judge, maybe I'm judging a little, but it is what it is now. Yeah, I see this a lot in Reddit, and I also see this a lot on Amino. And let me back up, because I realize maybe I should define for you guys what the difference is too. So when I say personifying tarot, that's just like applying human like characteristics to a deck. So this is like assigning like a personality. to a deck. So saying like a lot of people refer to the wild as unknown as being very blunt and sometimes mean. I mean, that's personifying tarot. I think that in this bubble of personification, there is a subset of anthropomorphizers that take it to the extreme, and they are the people that you'll see comment like, "Oh, my deck is mad at me because I got a new one," or "I think my deck is jealous of my new deck." Does my deck hate me now? Stuff like that. Um, I think that personally that takes things a little too far. And let me give you a non spiritual example, I guess, of this, right? I think people tend to borderline personify inanimate objects a lot. I don't personally personify, but I do name stuff just because it's fun, right? Like, why not? Um, like my computer, I call Big Red because it's red. My car is named Nebula. People name boats. People name bicycles, stuff like that. But if you went up to someone and they said, "Hey, this is my boat, Stacy. She's a beaut. She runs nice and smoothly, and she's very reliable," right? That's personifying your boat, like, yeah, and that's also not unheard of. I mean, it might be a little weird to some people, but at the end of the day, it's also something that people are used to, right? Nobody's really gonna question it. But if that same person were to say, "Yeah, Sally's a little jealous because I bought this nicer boat and now she won't talk to me," like, do you see how that's weird? I know I'm not the only one. That is weird in any scenario. And just because we're in the tarot community does not mean suddenly that's no longer weird. So, yeah, I personally am okay with personifying. I'm not going to do it. I'm also not going to give advice about stuff like that because I don't work from that perspective. But anthropomorphizing, I mean, where do we as a community draw the line? I feel like there's like deeper issues, and I hope this doesn't come off as too mean, but I feel like there are deeper issues with people's connection to tarot when they do that, and it almost is like a toxic relationship that they should probably step away from, because it's, I don't know a nice way to say it's not healthy to uh, be fearful that an inanimate object is mad at you. Um, and I think that it can spark very deeply toxic relationships with how you use tarot going into the future. But I feel like that's probably a video for another time, because that kind of exceeds the topic of this video. But yeah, I think that if I were to summarize everything about personifying tarot, ultimately, like I said, I don't care if you do it. I do find it frustrating though that it's become commonplace to base giving tips and advice to people off of that personification, because I don't personally find it helpful. And this could be anecdotally just my perspective, but I feel like you're not giving people tips to start off on the right foot when you do that. So I feel like sometimes personification can hinder someone's growth if they're not already getting the foundations they need to learn and grow. And it's a very common pitfall, I feel like, to end up in. So I would say if I had one critique for the personification community, it would be that, to try to base tips for newbies or people in a rut or whatever. Try to base your advice off of the practical side before you give them the woo side. But Yeah. You guys will have to let me know what you think of this topic. Where do you guys fall into the scheme of personification versus not personification of tarot? Do you think anthropomorphizing decks is across the line, or am I just being dramatic? It wouldn't be the first time and it won't be the last, guys. But yeah, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. All right, bye guys.